Welcome to Noble Warrior. My name is CK Lin. This is where I interview thought leaders, entrepreneurs about their journey to master themselves, to have greater joy, prosperity, and purpose. My next guest is the entrepreneur of CTR.com. It stands for Conscious Thought Revolution. He is a father of three kids. He's the author of the new book, The New Millionaire's Playbook. If you're loving what he's saying, go to newmillionaireспlaybook.com or ctr.com to learn more about this. Welcome to Noble Warrior, Gordy Bal.
Amazing. Thanks for having me, CK. It's good to be here with you.
So good to have you. I'm so glad that Akira introduced us. So shout out to Akira. Um, so first question I want to ask you is tell us about the story of witnessing your Indian parents immigrated to Canada with $20 and how that catalyzed your desire to become an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think like a lot of kids who grow up to immigrant parents, we see life a little different, and we see the tremendous amount of struggle and strife and effort that at least in my case, my parents put into building a life with nothing in a new country. And so I think for me as a kid, watching them really work hard and see them, at times struggle, it created this meaning for me as a kid that, well, I need to make a lot of money, because if I make a lot of money, then I can help them. I can help them not be stressed out. I can help them be more calm and peaceful and present. And so that's what got me into this sort of entrepreneurial pursuit at a young age. It was like, well, I'm going to figure this game out. I'm going to figure out, how to make lots of money, how to become rich, and then solve all the problems with the money that I make. And as you know, a lot of us find out when we do achieve financial success, we actually realize that sometimes more money equals more problems. And so that's what got me started on the pursuit of entrepreneurialism, was like, I gotta help people. I gotta help my family. I gotta help my community.
So you had a strong motivation to kept you going and you had early successes from the get-go. You were very fortunate that way. Just tell us a little bit about how quickly you were able to achieve that financial success that you desire and before we ask you the next question.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I'd say really when it occurred to me that you can make a lot of money was in high school. I was, being a kid of the internet, I was able to discover opportunities on how to drive traffic and, make money by being able to be an affiliate marketer and sell products and services by really what I got good at was it's referred to as SEO, or search engine optimization. But really it was just about tricking Google and tricking the algorithms and understanding how they work, so that you could get your websites ranked high. And so, while everybody else around me were busy, playing video games or, doing kid stuff, I was sitting on my computer, really figuring out how to, leverage this thing called the internet. And so early on in grade 11 and 12, I started seeing that, I saw that I could make a lot of money. And two, I just started also seeing how, a lot of people in the world are willing to spend money on things that don't really serve them and don't really help them become better. And so there's two things happening at the same time. One was this realization, like, holy crap, I can make a lot of money. And there was like, whoa, humans are willing and able to just spend money on things that aren't actually really good for them. So there's this like juxtaposition and paradox that was becoming present to me at the same time.
So at what how long before you get into the journey before you call this cognitive dissonance would became too great for you to say, all right, I gotta shift to something else?
Yeah. Well, I'd say, yeah, I've shared, as I share in the book, one of the first moments where I started questioning the sort of the bigger system at play was after the events of 9/11. So I was around 20 years old at the time, and I saw this sort of global catastrophe occur, and I saw how, so many people were absorbed by a narrative that was being, shared through the TV, the television screen, and this. So I'm watching people absorbed and almost like hypnotized by TV screen, giving a specific narrative on what happened and how it happened. And to me, it didn't make a lot of sense. There was a lot of questions that were unanswered. And so I started that got me, really starting to ask the questions of like, how does the world really work? Like, what is war? What is war actually? What's actually happening? And being somebody who was entrepreneurial minded, I've always had this curiosity around business and how business works, and what are the incentives and who's winning at what cost. And so as I started to kind of peel away the layers of like, what is war? What is government? What is money? What is banking? What are all these sort of large institutional powerful organizations that exist around the planet, and how do they actually work? Are they actually serving the greater good, or are they perhaps potentially operating in a way that's not for the greater good? And so when I started seeing that the way that the world was constructed wasn't really actually in our best interest, the dissonance started to occur when I also started realizing that I was playing that game too. I was also playing a game where I was looking to gain financially regardless of what the cost was to the outside world, to other people, to customers, to consumers, to institutions, to whatever it may be. And so that's when I started having this, cognitive dissonance of like, well, I want to, be successful and, be wealthy, but I don't want to do it at the cost of everybody else and the planet. So that's what started kind of driving this next evolution of questioning and growth, which was like, what's the real game here? What is the nature of reality? What is my purpose? If the
Before,
game isn't to just
yeah, before you get
yeah,
into
yeah,
the
yeah,
next
yeah,
phase, I just want to double click on something real quick, right? Um,
yeah.
for the people that are still in the game, in the matrix, as you call it, and they're now becoming aware of this cognitive distance, whether it's the matrix, the external world, the power and the money and all these things, how it works, but they're also paying attention to the inner world, and they start to see this misalignment that you also have articulated. It's often the spiritual community talk about this kind of stuff a lot, but not a lot in the entrepreneurial community. So from someone
Hmm.
who are in both worlds, coming from you, that would mean a lot. It's a lot more credible. So tell us a little bit more about the symptoms of this cognitive dissonance, so that the entrepreneurs can say like, oh, I know exactly what that is. Can you just double click on that?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, sure. Well, cognitive dissonance is really only referring to the misalignment in the mind, where your mind is, perceiving two opposing things at once. But when you sit with it long enough, it does become symptomatic. And when you actually start feeling into the misalignment, it shows up as physical symptoms. Like I started becoming unhealthy. I started becoming, I was like my mental health was struggling. I was questioning my entire existence. I was sad. I was depressed. I was numbing myself. And so, and I was, and at the same time, I'm still in this caught in the rat race of pursuit because I have a large, team to, pay for their livelihood and keep them on payroll. And I have like, this persona to keep up of like this successful entrepreneur who is really good at, business. And so, there was these moments where I was actually, and that's where I came up with this framework of measuring your mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual well-being, because all four of those were suffering. My mental health was suffering, my emotional health, I didn't even know what my feelings were. I didn't even know how to feel my feelings. My physical health was suffering. I was feeling sick, I was feeling tired. I was having, you know, it was hard to get out of bed because I had no purpose. I had nothing, no deeper purpose that was awakening that warrior energy within me. And spiritually, I sometimes I talk about how I felt spiritually bankrupt. So those are like the symptoms that were occurring from this cognitive dissonance, where I'm like, whoa, I'm playing a game that is, and that I am clear is not a game that's meant to be played for the greater good of our entire civilization, or for the greater good of my own being and my own soul. Like, it's one thing to, you know, become righteous and be like, oh, I'm going to change the world, and all of that's great and dandy, but how about you start with yourself? So that was the big moment for me, where I was like, oh wait, like I need to actually just look in the mirror and have that revolution, inner revolution for myself, and start working on some of these things.
And thank you for being specific, Gordy, because often we hear, oh, mental health or physical health, that's very generalized, where when
Yeah.
you talk about you want to get up if you're depressed, you didn't use these words, but I would use my own words, addiction, right? And I wanted to, numb myself with social media, whatever other substances or places or parties to go to, so that I don't have to feel what I feel. I don't feel anything. I don't feel alive. I don't, I have an existential crises of like, what the fuck is the point of my life? Like, this is, like, what's the point of all this, right? So the more specific that we can be, the more be like, oh, I know exactly those are the symptoms that I have. So I really appreciate this.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So so now that we described this, you realize this, and then something's got to give. What did you do next?
Yeah, so I'd say I really started, you know, the first phase and the first stage was what I call deconstructing the external world, understanding what the matrix is, how does it work, what are the mechanisms by which it is held up. And so when I feel like I got a good sense of how it works, and understanding the system and the incentive structures that are in place, I came to this realization that, whoa, the game is set up where, a few benefit at the cost of everybody else on the planet. And so when I came to that realization, I was like, wait, so what's the real game then? And instead of continuing to point outward and deconstruct the external world, my shift focused inward. And that's when, so the big questions I started asking myself is, like, as you pointed out, what is my purpose? Why am I actually here? What is beyond my physical existence that I need to look at and connect with? And also asking, what's the nature of reality? So I understand how the three-dimensional world is sort of orchestrated and set up and created, but what's beyond that? What's beyond the veil? How does reality actually get created? How does it get rendered? And what is consciousness? Like, what is human consciousness, and what is the interplay with my own existence with it? And so as I started diving deep into these questions, that's been, I'd say I spent a substantial amount of time, energy, and finances to invest in understanding what I say is my operating system, my software, my hardware, and really understanding how it all works and diving deep into the nature of myself. And as I dove deep, what started to come true was that I am an active participant in the unfolding of the entire universe. And that which I was seeing externally, so that which I was pointing fingers externally to, was just a projection or a byproduct of our collective consciousness. We, as a 8 billion species, all have consciousness as well as unconsciousness. It's all of the part. It's our, in Jungian language, we'd call it our shadow. And so, our collective shadow manifests in ways which represent a, a beingness that is actually not in service of our all of us. And so, but instead of like eliminating it, what I started realizing was actually to get to know it, get to know the unconscious parts of myself, peel back my own layers, look at the parts that are not healed, look at the ways in which I've developed belief systems and stories that are in my subconscious and unconscious, and bring them to the light, face them, which was an uncomfortable feeling, and then heal them by, and a big part for me, and I'd love to hear your process, and if you have any tools that you recommend as a noble warrior. But for me, a lot of it was really holding, you know those pieces in love, those aspects that were hidden, is really holding them in love so that they can have the unconscious aspects of ourselves. That's what they need. They need love. When they're not loved, they hide even more, and then they show up in sideways ways and unconscious ways, and that stems out collectively. Then our collective unconscious shows up in ways where there's power systems that are extracting from the planet and people. And so it's easy to say, oh, there's bad guys, but the truth is it's just unconsciousness. So that's when I realized, like, really, the game to play is to become more conscious, and to continue to wake up, and to continue to cultivate unconditional love, and heal and spread and reverberate, and use these vibrational frequencies of love to impact and move out and move forward. So that when I believe that when enough of us humans get into this place of an elevated state of consciousness or love, then we will actually go through a quantum leap and evolve to our next iteration of whatever our humanity is. Like, this is an end game. Like, we started off as, we started off as stardust, and then we all the way from Neanderthal to Homo sapiens to now whatever we are, to, soon what maybe will be a hybrid with AI, or whatever it is, whatever the next iteration is. um, I believe that we need a higher state of consciousness, and so the more of us that can really dedicate ourselves to heal and find love over fear, then we're giving ourselves a shot. And part of that, I continue to say and remind myself, is reconnecting back to nature, to realize that we are nature. We are not separate from it, and only then can you actually solve a lot of the problems around the degradation of the planet. It's hard to solve a problem when you still see yourself as separate from it. When you see yourself as it, as nature, as the universe, can you solve it from a different consciousness.
I love that journey, by the way, Gordy. You took an outside in approach. You started by looking at the external world, and then you started to look inward, and then you go from there. You realize that the source of everything, the external reality, is consciousness, and then you started to look at, how do you integrate, how do you rebalance, how do you harmonize the shadow side of you, and then start to go from there. Confucius said, 齐家治国平天下. It means self-mastery, family, country, world. So same fractal, effect. And um, I just love, by the way, we are able to talk in technology terms and union language and spiritual terms, so we can just kind of interbalance them back and forth. It's really cool. So that's another reason why I was really excited to speak to you, because Noble Warrior, I am a bridge of different worlds. I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs who are very materialistic, 3D reality based, data driven. I am a practitioner of plant medicine. I sit with a lot of spiritual people, and then they're very woo esoteric language, which is fine, no problem. But what I really love is I'm a householder first and foremost. I don't plan to go to the jungle, go to the top of the mountain, into the cave, and just live there as a monk. I want to bridge the ancient technologies and then the cutting edge technologies as a way to enhance the macro, all of it together. So, hence why talking to someone like you is very invigorating for me, as you can tell.
Yeah, I love the multidimensionality of it. Like, for me, it's funny because I can relax into the woo, or the spiritual, sort of ethereal nature of our being, but I'm also highly stimulated by intellectual conceptual understanding of how things actually work on a scientific level. And so that's been really fun for me, right? I've been really enjoying studying the art and science of manifesting, as an example, because manifesting can be very woo and ethereal. But when you actually look at the electromagnetic and biochemical processes and work that contribute towards this notion of manifesting, and how you can alter the reality, the it's that stuff really gets me excited. So the yeah and I talk about that as well, is that the truth is multidimensional, and it's not binary. It's not this or that. It's both. And I speaking of noble warrior, I in one of my favorite chapters of the book is chapter 6, where I talk about a wealthy spiritual warrior, where there's three terms that all seem to be opposing of each other. And what I talk about is really how you know all of us inherently have this warrior energy that's in our DNA, in our soul, in our essence. And what happens over time is, the way the matrix is structured is our warrior energy actually gets used by external forces. And a great example of that is professional fanatic sports, as an example, where there's two opposing sides of a team, and you're at war. It's like you're going to war for billionaire sports team owners who are putting athletes on a payroll to basically fight till the death. Or in politics, it's like in the U.S., it's just like there's only two sides. It's like red, blue, or Democrat, Republic. And so these are ways in which our warrior energy is being used to fight a war that's actually not really our war to fight. It's just a way to keep us divided. It's the age old strategy of divide and conquer. So one of the things that I really have been leaning into is this idea that truth is multidimensional, and that warrior energy is about seeing all the truths, and then finding your truth, the truth from your soul, your essence, and being a stand for that, and being and going not to war for it, but to then. And I make the analogy of, like, in yoga, the warrior pose is a stand. It's not about going and killing and fighting. It's about taking a stand. The warrior pose is a stand. And so to be a warrior is to take a stand for truth. So anyway, yeah, the truth, it's I love the multidimensionality of, we can talk neuroscience and quantum physics, and then we can also talk about spiritual and woo and ethereal concepts and everything in between.
Yeah.
And make dad jokes. I have amazing dad jokes if you want some.
Well, you don't know this about me. I have a PhD in biomedical engineering. So I came from the world of data driven analysis, very heady and all those things, Chinese, right? You're Indian, right? And then over time, uh, learned the quote unquote limitations of the scientific method. And then
Yeah.
that's the awakening of my spirituality, and also bridge and integrate these two worlds as who I really am. And to that point, one of the principles we talk a lot on the Noble Warrior a lot is the yin and the yang. That's such a beautiful symbol of how do we maintain. I mean, there's nothing in the world that doesn't have polarity. All of them have polarity. And how do we find a harmony between the yin and the yang? So we talk a lot about tactically, how do you do that? Is it mercy or is it fairness? So these are opposing values, and how do we find that truth within us? So everything you say, that's why I'm
Yeah.
smiling a lot and nodding my head.
So I'm curious, with your background and PhD, from the scientific lens, have you started to see how you can describe a more ethereal concept like yin yang through the lens of science? Have you
Yeah,
started playing with that a little? Because if so, please tell me, because I'd love to utilize it.
yeah, yeah. So regarding these type, so because I know in your book you talk about all, you talk about truth, you talk about
Yeah.
love. I think it was Jason Silva or someone like that that I actually looked into. Um, these type of fundamental principles, truth, love, wisdom, these are to be experienced, but no words. are enough to describe in the totality of the phenomenon. Hence why
Mm,
that you are a practitioner of plant medicine as well. We experience truth, we experience forgiveness, we experience letting go of something, but no words is enough to truly capture what we feel.
yeah.
So, in terms of scientifically trying to explain this, I actually steer away from that because if people want me to convince them through data, that's probably not the type of audience that I'm going for. Uh,
Right.
what I do teach is direct experience. If you can experience
Yes.
truth, experience love, experience beauty as the essence of your being, that is much more telling than me trying to give you some data points about so and so did double blind study this
Yeah.
or that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I love it. No, I always say that too. It's like, it's con- take consciousness, or, God, or however you want to frame the greater intelligence. I always say, how do you languageize the unlanguageable? And I'm using
Exactly.
words that aren't even real words to
Yeah.
make the point, right? So I'm with you 100%. It's like, language is finite, but experience and consciousness and universe and God, it's infinite. And so trying to take the infinite and put it through a limited or finite, you know pipe to try to it's laughable in itself. But I love it. Yeah, so it is around direct experience. And so that's why one of the things I also really got excited about was designing the 7 minute, I call it the magic meditation. And it's a 7 minute direct experience where you can experience your own essence in a way that you don't typically do, because your monkey mind is always on all day, and you're in the programming and the conditioning, and you're living in the three-dimensional world. And a lot of like my entrepreneurial friends, or founders, investors that I coach, they'll always have an excuse of like, I don't have 20 or 30 minutes to meditate. And to them I'm saying, well, then you need an hour to meditate. But also I wanted to really I really wanted to distill a process into 7 minutes. What can you do in 7 minutes per day to engineer synchronicity, and explore the using the energies of your body to manifest. And it's because it's like you said, it's about the direct experience. You can't deny direct experience. You can argue facts, quote unquote facts, and science and studies all day long, but that still does not negate direct experience.
I listened to that already. So well done.
Oh, cool.
Great music. Very Burning Man esque. I love it. Uh, yeah. So for those who are listening, I recommend it highly. Gordy has been very generous in sharing a lot of the resources for the grand price of $0. So, so for those of you who want to get into more of his work, he offer a set of tools that's tremendous. So, thank you for your generosity.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of Burning Man, do you still have friends stuck there?
they're just coming back. Yeah, they're just
They're
coming
just
back.
starting. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
yeah, it's
So a friend of
crazy.
mine
Signs
was
of things to come.
a friend of mine was a ranger, and he said it was the hardest year that he's ever been, and also the most rewarding as well. Because it's the yin and the yang, right? Depends on the lens of which you look at it.
Yeah,
You can complain about it, or you can actually look at it as a gift. And he said, was both, right? Everything is
it's
duality.
both. Yeah, yeah, it's
So,
crazy. I know. I've um,
so Gordy, I got a question I gotta ask you, right? Because I know we don't have a lot of time, so I have so many questions I want to ask you. For someone who want to deepen their understanding of the matrix, deepen their understanding of the inner world. In your book, you mention a lot of the inner world, a lot of the tactical practices that one can do. What about the understanding of the matrix? Is there anything, any any books, anything you can point them to so they can
yeah,
have a better understanding of what it actually is, and not from a conspiracy theory kind of view, just like actually look at it. Let's look at it objectively.
yeah, yeah. Well, one of the things that when I'm working with founders, and part of what I really like doing to help them kind of see how the matrix might be impacting them is to just get into the metacognitive awareness to observe their thoughts. And if you create the space to do, a thought audit, you can actually begin to see how many of your thoughts are being programmed by external signals, whether that's your social media feed, whether that's the culture, whether that was your parents, whether that's like, the institution you got educated in. And so that's a really quick way and a quick hack to do it, is to start auditing your thoughts and just seeing how many of them are programmed from external sources versus them being organically arisen from your own consciousness, from that are connected to your soul. And so, I when I in the book I break down this concept of the matrix, that it's a simulated reality by power systems that have been constructed to continue to proliferate agendas to maintain power and control. There's no conspiracy about that. That's just, you can see there are global organizations that have certain intentions and incentives and mandates that have a direct plan to execute, that keeps most humans, most of us, in this in this matrix. That's why most, this game for over 100 years, like I talk about the education system a lot, right? Like it was designed in the early 1900s, by John D. Rockefeller, who specifically said, "I don't want a nation of thinkers. I want a nation of doers." And then he went and founded the General Education Board, and ended up getting it co-opted by the U.S. Congress. And the system's the same. Like, the school and education system is the same. It's to indoctrinate children to be obedient to somebody that's telling them what to do, what to think. They're not being taught how to think, they're being taught what to think, which is they're being programmed. So again, I always come back to, like, do an audit of your thoughts and do an audit of your external inputs. Look at the last 10 people you've communicated with. How much are they influencing your thoughts? How much are you in like a dynamic with those 10 people or any person, where you're just affirming your position for something because you feel like you need to, because that's the social dynamic that's been created. And so that's like the biggest exercise. Just do a thought audit. Take 10 minutes, just, get big, fall into silence and just notice the thoughts that arise, and just, you'll know. And if you can, if you had a Fitbit for your thoughts, or you had some device, which I can't wait to have at some point. And we can talk about that later, as because I've been, investing in technologies for the last 5 years that are helping accelerate the evolution of human consciousness. And so we're not that far from a world where we'll be able to measure the quality of our thoughts. And so, but you can do that on your own. You don't need a device. You don't need a wearable technology. You can just do that on your own, do a thought audit, and just start noticing, like, whoa, most of my thoughts are actually just regurgitated. And if you go sometimes walk by a Starbucks and you see two people talking to each other, if you actually just like kind of observe and listen to the context and the content of the conversation, you'll actually, it's almost like two social media algorithms are just talking to each other. They're regurgitating their feed to each other versus actually having a meaningful connection of soul to soul. And so these are the kind of the symptoms that you can notice and catch yourself in too. Like, catch yourself, like, did I just read that on my feed, and now is that the thing that I'm having this conversation about? And did I actually assess if that truly resonates deeply with me, or is that just the talking point now that's been put into my consciousness? um, so yeah, that's, and then later on I also talk about how the matrix actually isn't a bad thing. It's a co-created thing. For most of us it's curated externally, but when you realize that you're co-creating it, then you can play inside the matrix. It's like the movie, did you watch Free Guy? I don't know if you watched
I
the
have.
Ryan Reynolds
Yes,
movie
I
about,
have. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's
yeah.
just
Of
something like
course.
that, right? Like he woke up inside of the metaverse, and he's like, oh, I can like play inside here. So similarly, like when we actually begin to connect to our true essence and our soul, we can actually plug back into the matrix and play with it a whole lot different. And we're not as, subjugated to the power systems as much as we can be aligned to our own truth.
Can you give us an example? I mean, I'm aligned with conceptually and
Yeah.
everything that you've been telling about energetically as well.
Yeah.
I'm excited for that
Yeah.
possibility. Um, a
Yeah.
few different schools of thought, right? So one school of thought is, fuck the matrix. Let me go to the jungle, the cave, the the mountaintop and I'm gonna be a, living in a monastery. That's one approach, no problem. Another
Yep.
approach is, hey, I can't change the system. Let me just play the game as best as I can in the system. Another approach you just mentioned is, let me actually, I'm a free guy, like the movie. Let me just play how I wanted to play because I'm a creator. I'm an infinite creator, spiritual being living a human life. Give us a concrete example how you are doing that. That would be very helpful.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And one thing I'll also just say to your point of like, oh, I want to just go to the monastery. Your monastery is right here, right now. You don't need to go anywhere. Your monastery is right here, right now. And that's the practice. You don't need to escape or go into, a mountaintop or into the forest. You can if that's what you desire, but the real practice is to make this present moment your monastery. An example of how I plugged back into the matrix. So I share this in the book. So part of my journey and story was like growing up in Canada. I was a massive, again, conditioned by the culture I was and the Canadian culture. I was really big into professional hockey, like the NHL. I was big into I was fully indoctrinated. I was a season ticket holder for over a decade, spending $10,000 plus a year, watching every game. Like I was in it. I was like rooting my team and like and so I was fully bought into this, this system that's designed by the Matrix. um and then in 2011, and then I talk about the story of how once, in 2011, where I almost bought Bitcoin instead of this season tickets for the Vancouver Canucks, and that Bitcoin would have been worth over $500 million today, and how the Matrix stole $500 million from me because I ended up deciding to renew my season tickets instead of buying the Bitcoin. But anyway, so in 2011, I talk about, when the Vancouver Canucks, who I was the season ticket holder of because I grew up in Vancouver, they lost in the Stanley Cup Finals, and the city was having riots and the city was on fire, and I had this out of body experience. I was like, what the fuck did I just do for the last 10 years? What did I just spend all this money, energy on? I just got sucked into this thing that's like what is it? What's really going on here? And so, I completely peeled back and I completely stopped any kind of investing of time, energy, consciousness into professional sports. Fast forward, and now my son, my oldest son, who's 11, ever since he was born, he loves hockey. He loves the NHL. And so and for me, I've like reoriented and reintegrated my relationship to it because now, as I can now watch it in a way where I can enjoy it, not judge it, go to a game with my son, watch him get lit up by these extremely talented athletes who are giving it their all to perform and play at an elite level, and understand like the energy of an audience, and understand like the business of how this works. So it's like an unknowingness, it's an awareness, it's like a leaning back and observing and watching and being like, oh, okay, cool, versus like being like totally like the cog in the wheel of it, like, oh, just a zombie, like, yeah, let's take my money, okay, I'm gonna get my drink, and I'm gonna, like, so it's like this knowingness of participating in a system of the matrix, as opposed to being fuel for it and being used by it. So that's an example of it. And anything else, like even parties, or even like making money or make business, and all of it now, it's like when you're connected to your soul and a deeper purpose, and you make an impact, and you're not subjugated to the rules of the matrix whereby it's squeezing you. Now you play with it because you're an active participant of it. The matrix isn't outside of you. It's, again, like I spoke earlier, it's just an active unfolding of the universe itself. It's just unconscious elements of our collective consciousness. So instead of separating yourself from it and saying, oh, forget the matrix, it's just like, oh, this is the matrix, this is how it works, this is how I can interface with it, and this is how I can show up with light, love, and light, and inject my soul essence into it towards our collective healing.
I love that. As you're speaking, the game Monopoly comes to mind. These are all artificial games that we play, right? Whether it's business or going to hockey or whatever. Sometimes we treat those things as real. I am a hockey player. If my hockey team loses, I'm gonna flip a table and start a riot because my hockey team was violated. Versus like, hey, this is a Monopoly game. Like, do you get really crazy when don't have enough Monopoly money or have a lot of Monopoly money? Is you look at it kind of like that. Like, enjoy the game for what it is, enjoy life, and not to take it so
Um,
seriously like that. So that's what I got from your
yeah.
share.
Yeah, that's it. And before we started this podcast, you and I talked a little bit about what younger CK and younger Gordy want, and that's it. It's play. It's like how do we not take things too seriously? And I think that's part of the magic as well, is just, you know, continue to play and enjoy the process, because this whole, human experience, it's just a snap of the finger, and it's like we're a speck of nothing in the grand vast nothingness, while we are also everything in the grand vast of everything all at the same time. And so I think, when you remember that, you can like, remind yourself not to take it so seriously. And so I love how you said that. Yeah, it's just like chill.
So on the note of not taking it so seriously, and I'm gonna do a hard segue. What kind of companies are you most excited about in terms of raising human consciousness in the game that you are playing?
Yeah, so I'm really so okay. So I'll talk a little bit about, so I've played this. I went from entrepreneur and then I moved into venture capital. I launched a venture capital fund with the thesis that if we invest in companies that are dedicated to raise human consciousness, then not only can we have a massive return on investment, but we can actually make a massive impact towards human flourishing. And so we got to invest in some really cool companies. One of our success stories was the Aura Smart Ring. I think you're wearing one. You might be wearing one. I thought, yeah, yeah, exactly. So this is an example of a company. We invested at around a $25 million valuation, and now they're worth $2.5 billion. And so we get to go to our investors and say, look, not only did you just make a massive return on your investment, but you've helped over 1 million lives improve their well-being by using data as a force for good. And so
Mm,
and
I
and
like
so
that
Aura is a perfect
data as a
example.
force for good. I love that.
Yeah, because that's going to be such a key point. All these social media companies like the Facebooks of the world, like, they've been designed to use data as a force to mine our attention and to keep us engaged in these feedback loops so that we continue to be eyeballs for advertisers. That is not necessarily a force for good. That's just a force for monetization. But if we can design, companies and technologies, products and services that are using data as a force for good that can measurably improve our mental, emotional, physical, or spiritual well-being, then that bridges and converges both the, hey, investment opportunity, because I think more and more, as $70 trillion moves hands from the boomer generation to millennial and Gen Z, we're seeing a different set of values. Millennials and Gen Z care a lot more about well-being. They care more about regenerative principles. They care more about community. And so not only is it a big market opportunity from an investment standpoint, but it's actually helping move the needle towards human flourishing, because we're moving capital not just from, hey, let's see where we can make a lot of money, but we're like, hey, let's see where we can make money while also making a big impact in the world. And so that's what's exciting for me. And yeah, so if there's, I'm and part of
Is
the
there
thing that
is
I'm
there
always
anything
looking at.
else? Is there anything else beyond the Aura Ring that you're really excited about?
Yeah, there's a few companies we've invested in. There's that I'm excited about. I won't name all of them, but a few of them. One of them is called Endel, Endel. You can download the app. What it does is it auto generates AI based soundscapes to regulate your nervous system. So they're really exciting because they've done deals like with Volvo, one or Volkswagen, one of the largest car companies in Europe, where their technology will be baked into the smart car. So imagine yourself being in a traffic jam and your cortisol level increases. Well, the AI will auto generate a soundscape that will regulate your nervous system down. So again, it's using data as a force for good to help you be in a state of parasympathetic nervous system, because most humans are in a sympathetic nervous system where, in fight or flight. But if we want to enter a state of coherence and parasympathetic, then these kinds of tools can help augment that. We also were really excited about a company we invested in called Trip, which is it's a VR augmented reality experience that again is helping you alter your mood from stress to well-being. We've invested in you spoke of psychedelics quite a bit. We invested in Paul Stamets' company called Mycomedica, that's bringing the power of psilocybin to the world. That's really exciting for me. Yeah, so we've invested in a number of companies that I'd say we're excited, and I'm continuing to look at really good companies. I'm also what I'm most interested in is the convergence of health data and fintech data, health data
Mm,
and finance data, bridging those together where we can begin to develop evolutionary algorithms that can show that the more you improve your health, the more your financial abundance grows.
mm.
So I'm excited about seeing opportunities that are being developed in that convergence.
Wow, is there any company specifically that focusing that
I'll keep you
convergence?
posted.
That's really interesting. Actually,
I,
I never think of it that way. Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, it makes a lot of
yeah.
sense.
We're working on incubating right now, actually.
I
So I'll
love
keep you
that.
posted.
Yeah. Well, one thing I also really appreciate about you, Gordy, is this. Yes, we talk about biohacking and these type of principles about wellness. We can nerd out about these type of MEPS, you call it MEPS, principles and practices all day. And then we talk about spiritual principles and all these things. But you also are quite savvy with the 3D mechanisms, right? You talk about DAO, you talk about all kinds of things. So, um, let's see. Is there anything that you can speak about? How do you use these type of Web 3.0 mechanisms as a way to create new organizational structures, architectural structures, infrastructures that would help facilitate the next generation of human flourishing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think more and more what we're going to realize on a sort of global macroeconomic level is that this concept you've probably heard of, ESG, environmental sustainable governance. It's like a label that's being associated to investment, like measuring the ESG and ensuring that investment dollars are following the principles of ESG. As much as I love the principles and the philosophy of what it stands for, I would say it's not really tackling the problem at the root cause. It's I think if you look at certain principles in Web3 where it's fully decentralized and you're really creating mechanisms by putting power back to the people and you're really transforming governance. You're not just see with the ESG when it comes to like governance, they have certain sort of mandates where it's like, okay, now based on this company, you need a certain gender or gender identified person on your board, and by checking off that tick mark, now you've accomplished ESG, an ESG principle or whatever. And like as beautiful that is from being inclusive, it still doesn't really solve the root cause, right? It doesn't change the game that we're playing, where power is continuously consolidated at the top, where less than half a dozen companies control all the media and all the finance and all the banking, like that. So how we're going to flip that switch, I think Web3 is a great portal to that. I think there's a lot of issues. I think there's still a lot of scams in crypto and Web3, but the philosophically what it stands for about being decentralized and being a movement towards putting power in the hands of people, that I stand for, and that I really am excited about, and can't wait to see where it goes. So I'm also looking in Web3 for projects that are meeting that convergence I spoke about earlier, where it's really playing the game in a different way and show like I get excited where you can substantiate a thesis through your project. And one thesis that I want somebody to substantiate is that the more you improve your MEPS, your mental, emotional, physical, spiritual well-being, the more wealthy you become. Where
Mm,
I want to see a project where they're showing that health is wealth.
Mm.
and like truly substantiating that. So those are the kinds of things, and I think Web3 is where that kind of stuff is. The opportunities are more rich and ripe for that kind of innovation to occur. Um, and yeah, so and I'm like I said, I'm looking at, where the CTR ecosystem is looking at actually incubating a project in that space right now, which is really exciting. But I won't. No spoiler alert for you today.
So I can talk to you forever. So this would be one of the last questions. Unfortunately, you don't have a lot of time. Otherwise, I'll talk to you for 3 hours. One of the things I noticed from the book, you list a lot of different tactics. You list a lot of different tactics, and I am a collector of timeless and the latest transformation and technologies as well. So the question for the skeptics who is like, hey, what keeps you consistent with your practice? Because you don't want to be, 1 inch deep with 1,000 things, right? You want to go really, really deep with your practice. So that's one. What keeps you from jumping from shiny object to shiny object?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, I think for me, it's like a cadence, right? Like I'm looking on a month by month basis. What do I need to focus on this month? And again, I use the framework of MEPS. Like, so, in the month of September for me, because the weather is changing and we're moving seasons, I tend to get a little, my mood starts to get lower during these time during the fall months. And for me, I'm like, okay, how what do I so if I'm going to focus on mental health for like my M for this month, so one is deciding on what you're going to focus on, one area, and then what is the one thing that you're going to do each day for this month that's going to move the needle. So you don't have to do 10 things, you don't have to do 20 things. If you have a checklist, and I have, like, in the book I provide one at the end of every chapter, just pick one, just do one every day, because that builds momentum, it builds consistency. But if you're trying to do 10 things, if you're trying to do 20, it's just, you're setting yourself up for failure, and it's not sustainable. But if you can do that one thing, and you do that one thing consistently for 1 month, you'll be surprised what happens in month two, you'll be surprised what happens in month three. So just do the one thing, choose what you're going to focus on for the month. For me, I choose what I'm going to focus on for the month, and then I pick one thing I'm going to do. And what ends up happening after week two is it ends up being two things, three things, four things, because then I just build momentum, and then my nervous system and my body and my system just asks for it. It's the switch has occurred inside. So that's what I would recommend.
I love that. Just share a personal story real quick. I started doing a 30-day yoga challenge, and my friends like, "Oh, that
Yes.
sounds like an oxymoron." Uh, I was like, "Oh, you're right," but nonetheless, it worked for me. And what I discover for me, I was able to find the intrinsic motivator in going to hot yoga
Yeah.
practice because what happy accident I found from that is my body really loves sweating. So now that I have the intrinsic motivator, it doesn't. I don't need an external structure like a game or consequences or a carrot to do that anymore. Now I just go because I actually want to. So,
Amazing. Yeah. It's funny. So last year I did the same thing. I did the 30-day yoga challenge, and it was actually one of the most transformative times. What day are you in right now
right now
on your
I
30
am
days?
33. I'm going for 60 now.
Oh wow, yeah. So you must be no. For me, I noticed a lot of emotion started moving after a while as well, because the emotions are stuck in the tissues, and so when you're actually stretching, you're making room for the emotions to move. That was really powerful. I didn't even expect that part. I was just like, oh, I'm gonna get more fit and become limber, and I was like, whoa, I just had like so much emotional healing. So yeah, that's a great part. But this has been great, CK. I'm so again, yeah. Shout out to Akira for connecting us. I hope this has been, really valuable, and I
Absolutely,
hope
absolutely.
and
So,
whoever's listening to this, get a copy of the book, New Millionaires
that's
Playbook.
right. Yes, yes. Let's make sure they go to the book New Millionaire Playbook.com. So, Gordy, thank you so much. Let me just take a moment to really acknowledge you. I appreciate the book. I appreciate the earnestness of you putting together everything. I appreciate your ability to cross pollinate and navigate business, spirituality, biohacking, all of it together in such a seamless way. So, thank you so much for your generosity and for being here and sharing your wisdom on Noble Warrior.
Amazing, and thank you for being such a noble warrior, CK. We'll talk again soon, brother.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you.